Jason Grant was used to the fast-paced, luxurious life of a successful millionaire. His days were filled with business meetings, managing his thriving company, and socializing with other wealthy individuals. It was a life that many envied, one that he had worked hard for and earned through sheer determination. Yet, despite his achievements, there was always something missing. He often felt a sense of emptiness, like something or someone was left behind in the past. One bright afternoon, as Jason was making his way down the busy street of the city, his gaze was drawn to a small, weathered figure sitting by the side of the road. At first, he barely noticed the homeless woman sitting near the entrance of a local coffee shop, holding two young children in her arms. Her clothes were worn and ragged, and her hair was messy and unkempt. It was clear that life had not been kind to her, and yet there was something strangely familiar about her. Jason's steps slowed as he passed by, a strange feeling stirring deep within him. He couldn't put his finger on it, but there was something in the way the woman held herself, in the way she looked at the world around her, that made his heart skip a beat. His curiosity grew as he found himself stopping, looking at her more closely. He studied her features for a moment, his mind racing, and then it hit him like a bolt of lightning. The woman's face, it was her, it was Emma. A flood of memories came rushing back. Emma, his first love, the woman he had shared countless dreams with when they were young. Back then, everything had seemed possible. They had been inseparable in high school, making plans for the future, imagining a life full of love and success. But life had its own plans. They drifted apart, and Emma had vanished from his life without a trace, leaving Jason heartbroken and confused. Jason's mind raced as he took a few cautious steps toward her, unsure of how to react. The years had passed, and Emma had changed. Her once bright and hopeful eyes had now become clouded with hardship. She looked different, of course, but it was unmistakably her, the woman he had once promised to never forget, now sitting on the sidewalk, lost in a world of struggle. His heart ached for her. How could this have happened? What had life thrown at her that led her here, with two young children in tow? His curiosity turned into concern. He couldn't just walk past her, not now. Not after everything they had been through. Not after all these years. Jason felt a strange mix of emotions, shock, disbelief, and a growing sense of responsibility. He had built a life for himself, a life of comfort and success, but at this moment, none of it seemed to matter. What mattered was Emma, and the unexpected turn his life had just taken. He had no idea what to expect next, but he knew one thing for sure. His life was about to change in ways he could never have predicted. Jason stood frozen for a moment, staring at the woman in front of him. His mind was racing, trying to make sense of the situation. Could it really be her? The Emma he had loved years ago. The woman he hadn't thought about in what felt like a lifetime. He found it hard to believe that someone who had once meant so much to him was now sitting on the street, struggling to survive. Taking a deep breath, Jason shook himself from his thoughts and walked closer to her. He didn't want to startle her, but his heart urged him to approach. As he got closer, he noticed the way Emma seemed to be lost in her own world, her eyes distant as she tried to comfort her children. One child, a little boy with messy hair, was clinging to her side, while a girl, slightly older, rested her head on her mother's lap, looking tired. Jason's heart tightened. He had always remembered Emma as someone with big dreams, someone full of life and hope. But the woman sitting before him seemed so different, worn, tired, and hopeless. He didn't want to intrude on her, but he couldn't just walk away. His mind kept racing, trying to process the moment. How had life turned out like this for her? He took another step, and this time, Emma looked up. Her tired eyes locked onto his, and for a brief moment, she didn't seem to recognize him. But then, something in her expression changed. It was as if a switch had been flipped. She stared at him, blinking in surprise, and her lips parted slightly, as though she was unsure whether she was seeing things. Jason felt a mix of emotions as he stood there, unsure of what to say or do. "Emma," His voice came out softer than he had intended. He hadn't meant to startle her, but as soon as the name left his mouth, he could see the recognition in her eyes. At first, Emma didn't say anything. She just continued to stare at him, as though she were trying to figure out whether this was real or just a figment of her imagination. Jason could feel her hesitation, the confusion in her eyes. He took another step forward, his heart pounding in his chest. "Jason," she finally whispered, her voice barely audible. The name seemed to catch in her throat, as if saying it out loud brought back memories she wasn't sure she was ready to face. Jason nodded slowly, a lump forming in his throat. "It's really you," he said, almost to himself. "I can't believe it." Emma blinked a few times, her face softening as she tried to process the situation. Jason could see the wheels turning in her mind, trying to make sense of the reunion that neither of them had expected. There was a long pause, filled with the quiet sounds of the city around them, and the soft whispers of the twins. I never thought I'd see you again," Emma said, her voice trembling. It was clear that she didn't know where to begin. So much time had passed, and so much had happened. Jason couldn't imagine how difficult it must have been for her, but he was determined to find out. They sat in silence for a moment, the world around them seeming to fade away as the weight of the years between them hung in the air. Jason wanted to ask her everything, to know what had happened, how she had ended up here, why she was on the streets. But he didn't want to overwhelm her. He simply waited for her to speak, for Emma to share her story when she was ready. Emma took a deep breath, her eyes not leaving Jason as she sat there, surrounded by the bustle of the busy street. The moment felt surreal, like something out of a dream. It had been so long, yet seeing him again felt oddly familiar. Her mind was flooded with memories of the past, of the days when life had seemed full of possibilities. But now, she was a different person, and the life she had once imagined seemed far away. "I don't even know where to start," Emma said softly, her voice shaky. She looked down at the twins, who were still clinging to her, as if they were her only anchor in the world. She smiled at them gently, brushing a strand of hair from the girl's face before looking back at Jason. Jason waited patiently, his eyes filled with concern and curiosity, not wanting to rush her. He had so many questions, but he knew the pain of the past might make it hard for her to open up right away. The years had clearly taken their toll on Emma, but Jason could still see the woman he had once loved in her eyes. Emma paused, trying to find the right words. "I never thought I'd end up like this. I never thought I'd be sitting on the street, begging for change." She shook her head slightly, as though she couldn't believe what she was saying. "It's just, life didn't turn out the way I expected." Jason could feel the weight of her words. The sadness in her voice was undeniable. It was as if the life she had dreamed of had slipped away without her realizing it. Jason had never imagined that this would be Emma's story. He had always remembered her as strong and independent, someone who was going to take on the world. But now, as he looked at her, he could see how much life had changed for her, and how much she had endured. Emma continued, her voice a little more steady now. "I had big plans, you know. I thought I would finish school, get a good job, and start a family. But somewhere along the way, things went wrong. The person I thought I could trust." She stopped, her voice cracking slightly. "The person I loved, he left, and I ended up alone, pregnant, and with no one to turn to." Jason's heart tightened. He couldn't imagine what she must have gone through. He had no idea that she had been through so much pain. The woman he had once been in love with had faced heartbreak and rejection, all while carrying the weight of 2 young children on her shoulders. His heart ached for her. "I tried," Emma whispered. "I really did. But every time I thought I could start over, something would happen. People would turn their backs on me, or things would fall apart. It felt like the world just kept pushing me down, and I couldn't get back up." She sighed deeply, her shoulders slumping with exhaustion. "Now, here I am. I don't even know how it got this bad." Jason listened carefully, feeling both sad and helpless. He wished he could take away the pain she had gone through. Wish he could turn back time and fix things. But he knew that wasn't possible. All he could do now was be there for her, in whatever way she needed. "Emma," he said softly, his voice full of sincerity. "I'm so sorry. I had no idea. But I'm here now, and I want to help. If there's anything I can do." Emma looked at him, her eyes filled with a mixture of disbelief and gratitude. For a moment, she just stared at him, as if trying to understand whether this was real or if she was imagining it. "Help," she repeated quietly. You really want to help me?" Jason nodded, his expression firm. "Of course. You don't have to do this alone anymore." For the first time in a long while, Emma allowed herself to believe in the possibility of something better. It wasn't going to be easy, and she wasn't sure how to accept help, but in that moment, she felt a flicker of hope. Jason's words were a lifeline, something she hadn't expected but was starting to desperately need. The twins shifted beside her, their soft murmurs filling the silence. Emma smiled at them, feeling their little hands tug at her clothes as if asking for reassurance. She turned back to Jason, still uncertain but somehow feeling a little lighter. "Maybe," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "maybe things can get better." Jason smiled, a warmth spreading in his chest. "I believe they can." The twins, now more awake and curious, looked up at Jason with wide eyes. The little boy tugged on his mother's sleeve, trying to get her attention. Emma glanced down at her children, giving them a soft smile before turning back to Jason. "They're my world," she said quietly, her voice filled with both pride and concern. "Their father, he left before they were born. I've been doing my best to raise them alone. I don't know what I would do without them." She brushed a few stray hairs from the boy's face as he clung to her, his small fingers gripping her sleeve tightly. Jason could see the love and devotion Emma had for her children, despite the tough circumstances. The twins, though young and innocent, had clearly been through more than any child should. Emma's words made his heart ache. He couldn't imagine what it must have been like for her to raise 2 children on her own, without any support. "How old are they?" Jason asked, trying to make a conversation and learn more about the little ones. Emma looked down at the twins, her face softening. "Lily is 4, and Max is 3, she replied, her voice full of love. "They're both so different, but they keep me going. Max is a little shy, but he's so smart for his age. Lily is, well, she's a firecracker, always asking questions and curious about everything." Jason smiled, watching as Lily playfully tugged at her brother's shirt. It was clear that Emma had raised them with so much love despite the hardships. He couldn't help but admire her strength. Raising 2 children while living on the streets was something he couldn't even begin to fathom. "So, what happened?" Jason asked gently. "How did you end up here, Emma?" She hesitated for a moment, as if the weight of the question was too much to bear. Finally, she let out a long sigh, her shoulders slumping slightly. "I tried. I really did. After their father left, I had nothing. No job, no money, no one to help me. I tried to find work, but no one would hire me. And then the bills kept piling up, and I couldn't make ends meet. Eventually, I ended up here, on the streets." She wiped away a tear that had started to form in her eye, trying to hold back the emotions that threatened to overwhelm her. Jason listened intently, his heart breaking for her. He couldn't imagine the pain and struggle she had faced over the years. And now, here she was, sitting in front of him, just trying to survive and take care of her children. The sight of Emma's strength, despite everything she had been through, left him in awe. "I don't even know how I got to this point," Emma continued, her voice shaky. "I used to dream of something better for myself and for them. I wanted to give them the life they deserve, but it just feels like I'm stuck." Jason sat quietly for a moment, his mind racing. He wanted to do something, to help her in some way. He knew that words weren't enough. Emma needed more than just sympathy. She needed a way out of this life. She needed hope. "Emma," he said, his voice calm and sincere, "you're not stuck. I can help you. I know this isn't easy, but you don't have to keep struggling on your own." Emma looked at him, her eyes full of doubt. "How? How can you help me? I don't even know where to start." "I have the resources," Jason replied. "I can help you get back on your feet. Find you a place to live, help with the twins, get you into a job, whatever you need. I want to see you succeed. You don't have to do this alone anymore." For a moment, Emma was silent. She looked at Jason, unsure of what to say. The idea of accepting help was foreign to her, and the thought of trusting someone again felt risky. But as she looked into Jason's eyes, she saw something that gave her hope, a chance to rebuild her life, to give her children the future they deserved. "I don't know if I can take that kind of help," she said quietly, almost to herself. "I've been on my own for so long." Jason gently placed his hand on hers. "I understand. But sometimes asking for help is the first step toward making things better. You don't have to face this alone anymore." Emma's eyes filled with tears. She had spent so long trying to do everything herself, trying to protect her children and keep them safe. She had never allowed herself to believe that there could be a way out. But in that moment, as Jason's words sank in, she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time: hope. Emma sat in silence for a moment, her mind swirling with uncertainty and fear. Jason's words, though kind and sincere, felt like a lifeline thrown into a sea of doubts. Could she really trust someone again? Could she accept help after everything she had been through? For so long, she had relied on herself to make it through each day. Letting someone else in, especially someone like Jason, who had once been so important to her, felt overwhelming. But as she looked at Jason, she saw something in his eyes that made her pause. It wasn't pity. It wasn't an obligation. It was genuine care. Jason wasn't looking at her with judgment or disdain. He saw her for who she was, and he wanted to help her. The thought was both comforting and terrifying. Her gaze shifted to her children, who were now playing with a small rock on the ground, unaware of the weight of the conversation. Max giggled as Lily placed the rock in her hand like a treasure, both of them lost in their innocent world. Emma's heart swelled with love and protectiveness. These children, her twins, were the reason she had never given up, no matter how hard life had gotten. They were the ones who kept her going when she felt like everything was falling apart. Jason followed her gaze, watching the twins with a soft smile. There was something about the way they interacted with each other, so full of life, so pure, that reminded him of his own childhood, a time when things seemed simpler. But he knew that life had a way of complicating things, and he couldn't help but feel a deep sense of responsibility to help Emma create a better future for these children. "I know this is a lot to take in," Jason said, breaking the silence. "But I want you to know that I'm here to help, not just with money or a place to stay. I want to help you find your strength again. I know you've been through so much, but I believe in you, Emma. You have so much to offer." Emma looked at him, her eyes filled with skepticism. "You really think I can turn things around? I've tried so many times, and it always feels like something's just holding me back." Jason nodded, understanding her hesitation. "I know it's hard to see a way out when you've been stuck in a cycle for so long, but sometimes all it takes is one person believing in you, helping you take that first step. You don't have to figure it all out at once. We can take it slow." Emma felt a lump form in her throat. For the first time in years, someone was offering her a chance, not just for herself, but for her children as well. She wasn't sure if she was ready to let go of her fear, but Jason's words struck a chord deep inside her. Maybe she had been too afraid to accept help because she didn't believe she deserved it. But the more she thought about it, the more she realized that her children deserved better. They deserved a future where they could thrive, where they wouldn't have to grow up in the shadows of her struggles. She glanced back at the twins, their innocent laughter filling the air. They had been through so much already, and Emma knew she couldn't keep them trapped in this life of uncertainty. Maybe, just maybe, it was time to let someone else help her. "I don't know where to start," Emma said, her voice barely a whisper. "But I want to try. I want to give them a better life." Jason smiled warmly, his heart swelling with pride. "That's all you need to do. You've already taken the hardest step, believing that there's a chance for something better." The air between them felt lighter now, the weight of her past struggles still there, but no longer as heavy. It wasn't going to be easy. It wasn't going to happen overnight. But for the first time in a long time, Emma felt like she wasn't alone in this fight. She had someone who cared, someone who saw her not as a victim, but as a person with potential, with strength, and with the capacity to rebuild. "I'm not sure how I'll repay you for this," Emma said, a mixture of gratitude and disbelief in her voice. "You don't need to repay me," Jason replied gently. "It's not about repayment. It's about giving you and your children a chance at a new beginning." The warmth in Jason's voice comforted Emma, but it also made her realize something important. She didn't have to carry the weight of everything on her own anymore. Jason wasn't just offering her help, he was offering her a partnership, a chance to stand together and face whatever came next. As she looked at Jason, Emma realized that the first step to rebuilding her life had already been taken. It wasn't just about accepting help, it was about opening herself up to the possibility of a future where she could thrive, where her children could grow up in a world of love, support, and hope. And for the first time in a long time, Emma felt like maybe, just maybe, there was hope after all. The next few days passed by in a blur for Emma. She had agreed to accept Jason's help, but the reality of it all felt surreal. She had spent so much time on her own, struggling to get by, that the idea of someone offering her a chance to start fresh felt almost too good to be true. But as Jason continued to check in on her and provide support, Emma slowly began to allow herself to believe in the possibility of change. Jason had arranged for them to stay in a small apartment in a quiet part of the city, away from the chaos of the streets. The space wasn't large, but it was clean, warm, and filled with potential. When Emma first walked through the door, she had to pause for a moment to let it sink in. This wasn't just a roof over her head, it was a chance at a new beginning. It felt like a dream. And for a brief moment, she had to stop herself from getting too emotional. The twins, too young to fully understand what was going on, ran through the apartment excitedly, their laughter echoing through the rooms. Emma couldn't help but smile as she watched them. Jason had also taken the time to help her get the twins settled into a nearby daycare. The children, still adjusting to their new environment, were hesitant at first, but within days they had begun to make new friends and even look forward to the new routine. It wasn't easy, and there were plenty of days when Emma felt overwhelmed, but the progress was undeniable. One afternoon, after Jason had dropped by to check in on her, Emma sat with him in the small kitchen of their new apartment. She made them both coffee, something she hadn't done in so long, and it felt almost normal again. Normal in a way she hadn't experienced in years. "Thank you," she said quietly, looking down at her hands as she stirred her coffee. "I know I've said it before, but I don't know how to thank you for all of this. I don't think I could have done it without you." Jason smiled, but it wasn't the smile of someone who wanted recognition. He knew he hadn't done this for gratitude. He had done it because he believed in Emma and her ability to overcome the odds. "You don't have to thank me," he replied softly. "I'm just glad I could be here for you. You're doing the hard work. It's all you." Emma shook her head, her eyes filled with uncertainty. "I don't feel strong enough. Some days, I just feel like everything is going to fall apart again." Jason leaned forward, his tone serious but gentle. "You've come a long way already, Emma. You've faced challenges that most people can't even imagine. You've got more strength in you than you realize. The past doesn't define you. It's what you do now that matters. And you're doing it, one step at a time, Emma looked at him, his words resonating deep within her. For so long, she had let the past hold her back, thinking that her mistakes and struggles had shaped who she was. But Jason was right. She didn't have to be defined by what had happened to her. She had the power to create something new. The weight on her shoulders didn't feel quite as heavy now. Her gaze shifted to the window, where the late afternoon sun was casting a soft glow over the city. She thought about the life she wanted to build for herself and her children. It wouldn't be easy. There would be days when she wanted to give up. But for the first time in a long while, Emma felt like she had something worth fighting for. "I'll keep going," she said softly, more to herself than to Jason. "For them. I'll do it for them." Jason smiled, his eyes filled with pride. "That's all you need. You've got this, Emma, and I'll be here whenever you need me." The conversation shifted to lighter topics, and they continued talking for a while. But Emma's mind kept drifting back to the words Jason had said. She realized that for the first time in a long time, she wasn't afraid of the future. The past might have been full of pain and loss, but the future held so much more: hope, possibility, and the chance to finally create the life she had always dreamed of. It was up to her now. And with Jason's support, she knew that even on the toughest days, she would have the strength to keep going. For her children, for herself, and for the future they would build together. As the weeks passed, Emma began to settle into her new life, though not without its challenges. There were days when the weight of everything, the pressure to succeed, the fear of failure, and the doubts that still lingered in the back of her mind, felt like too much to bear. But each day, she found herself taking small steps forward, building a routine for herself and the twins. They had their apartment, their little corner of the world, and for the first time in a long time, Emma felt like they had a place to call home. Jason continued to check in on her regularly, offering support in ways she hadn't expected. He didn't just offer financial assistance, though that had been invaluable. He offered guidance and a listening ear whenever she needed it. It wasn't just about giving her money or a place to stay. Jason wanted to help her rebuild her confidence and sense of self-worth. He made sure she knew that the strength she had shown so far was just the beginning. One evening, after putting the twins to bed, Emma sat at the small kitchen table, sipping a cup of tea. The apartment was quiet, the only sound the occasional creak of the old floorboards. The silence felt comforting, almost peaceful, but it also gave her too much time to think. She picked up the phone Jason had given her. He had insisted that she keep in touch with him, and though she was hesitant at first, she had come to appreciate it. The device now felt like a lifeline, a connection to the world outside her small bubble. She hesitated for a moment before dialing his number. He had told her to reach out if she needed anything, but she was still adjusting to asking for help. The thought of burdening him weighed on her. "Hello." Jason's voice came through clearly, and Emma could hear the warmth in his tone. "Hey, it's Emma," she said, trying to keep the uncertainty from her voice. I wanted to check in." Jason laughed softly. "I'm glad you called. How are you doing?" Emma paused, taking a deep breath. "Honestly, some days it feels like everything is going great. The twins are adjusting well, and I'm starting to feel more like myself. But other days, I don't know, I still feel scared, like I'm not doing enough." Jason's voice softened. "Emma, you've done more than most people could. You're not just surviving, you're thriving. You're creating a future for your children, and you're doing it with everything you've got. It's okay to have days when you feel uncertain. That's part of the process. But you're on the right path." Her heart warmed at his words. It was still hard for her to fully believe in herself, but hearing Jason's encouragement made her realize that she wasn't as alone as she had once felt. He wasn't just offering empty words. He believed in her. And for the first time in a long time, Emma found herself believing it too. "I guess I just don't want to mess this up," she admitted, her voice quiet. "I want to give them everything they deserve, and sometimes I feel like I'm not enough." "You are more than enough," Emma, Jason said firmly. You're doing what matters most. You're giving them love, a safe home, and a chance to grow. That's all they need. Emma smiled softly, the weight on her shoulders lifting ever so slightly. She had spent so much time focusing on what she didn't have, what she hadn't been able to do. But Jason was right. She was giving her children the most important things: love, stability, and hope. And that was enough. The conversation drifted to other topics, and Emma felt a sense of calm that had been absent for so long. For the first time, she didn't feel the constant pressure to be perfect. She realized that she didn't need to have all the answers right now. The future was still uncertain, but she was no longer facing it alone. She had people who cared, and more importantly, she was learning to care for herself again. The days began to blend together, and as the months passed, Emma found herself growing stronger. She started taking evening walks with the twins, enjoying the simple pleasures of watching them run and play. She even enrolled in a few online classes to continue her education, something she had always wanted to do, but had put off for years. With each new step, she felt more empowered. One afternoon, as Emma sat in the living room with Lily and Max, she looked out the window at the busy world beyond. It was easy to feel overwhelmed, but as she watched her children play, she realized something important. She had made it this far, and she would continue to move forward, one step at a time. She wasn't just a woman struggling to survive. She was a mother, a fighter, and a person capable of creating the life she had always dreamed of. And as long as she kept moving forward, she knew there was nothing she couldn't overcome. It had been several months since Emma's life had begun to change. The small apartment, once a place of uncertainty and fear, had transformed into a home filled with laughter, love, and warmth. The twins had settled into their new routine, growing more confident each day, and Emma found herself more at ease with the new life she was building for them. The constant worry that had once clouded her every thought was beginning to lift, replaced by a quiet hope for the future. Emma had started a part-time job at a local cafe, something she had never imagined she could do just months before. It wasn't much, but it gave her a sense of purpose. The job allowed her to meet new people, gain new skills, and feel like she was contributing to her family in a way she hadn't been able to in the past. She enjoyed the work, and even more than that, she enjoyed the independence it gave her. It was a small but significant step towards rebuilding her confidence. One evening, after finishing her shift, Emma walked back to her apartment, the cool night air refreshing after the heat of the day. She couldn't help but smile as she thought about how far she had come. She had once felt so lost, so broken, but now she could see a future unfolding before her. The weight of her past struggles hadn't disappeared, but it no longer defined her. She had learned to stand on her own 2 feet again. When she arrived home, the twins were already in bed, their small bodies curled up under the soft blankets. Emma stood by the door for a moment, watching them sleep peacefully. She was overwhelmed by love for them. And in that moment, she realized just how much she had fought for them. They were her reason for everything, the reason she had kept going even when things seemed impossible. As she quietly closed the door and walked into the living room, her phone buzzed. It was a message from Jason. She had come to rely on his support and guidance over the months, but it wasn't just about practical help anymore. He had become a friend, someone who cared about her well-being and offered advice whenever she needed it. Hope you're having a good evening. Just wanted to check in on you. You're doing amazing, Emma. She smiled as she read the message, feeling a sense of warmth spread through her. Jason had been there for her when she had no one else to turn to. His belief in her had never wavered, and it had made all the difference. In the weeks that followed, Emma continued to grow stronger. She took on more hours at the cafe, started saving a little money, and even began thinking about her future in ways she hadn't before. She started setting small goals for herself, things like getting her driver's license, going back to school, and even considering starting her own business one day. She wasn't sure how she would get there, but for the first time in years, she felt like anything was possible. One afternoon, Jason stopped by the apartment, as he often did, to catch up with her and see how things were going. Emma had prepared some coffee, and they sat together in the small living room, talking about their lives and everything that had changed since that first meeting on the street. "I can't believe how far you've come," Jason said, his eyes filled with pride. "You've done all of this on your own. You should be so proud of yourself." Emma looked at him, a soft smile tugging at her lips. "I never could have done it without you," she said quietly. "You gave me the chance to believe in myself again. You showed me that I wasn't alone." Jason shook his head, smiling. "You did all the hard work. I just pointed you in the right direction." Emma's heart swelled with gratitude. She had learned so much over the past few months, about herself, about strength, and about what it truly meant to create a life filled with purpose and love. She had started from nothing, but now she was building a foundation that was strong and solid. She knew there would still be obstacles ahead, but she felt more prepared to face them. As Jason stood to leave, he gave her a reassuring pat on the shoulder. "Keep moving forward, Emma. You're on the right track." After he left, Emma sat for a moment, reflecting on everything she had accomplished. She thought about the struggles she had faced and how, despite everything, she had never given up. She thought about the children sleeping peacefully in their room and how they had become the center of her world. She thought about the future, not with fear, but with excitement for the possibilities that awaited them. And as she looked out the window, watching the stars twinkle in the night sky, Emma knew that no matter what came next, she was ready. The past had shaped her, but it no longer controlled her. She had built something new, something beautiful, and for the first time in a long time, she could truly say that she was proud of herself.